Hey friends, welcome back to the Discovering Your Calling podcast. I am your host, Sherry Miter. And before we jump into today's podcast episode, I wanted to share one of the great reviews that my listeners have shared on Apple Podcasts. So this is from Chris Pierce, and she says, "Step into your purpose. Discovering your calling is filled with guidance, advice, and faith-based encouragement to help you step into your purpose and what God's calling you to. Sherry speaks with warmth, knowledge, and know-how as she cheers us on to step into our future." Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to leave that fabulous review. I really, really appreciate it. And you know what? Reviews do help listeners find the show. So thank you again for everybody who has taken the time to review the podcast. Welcome to the Discovering Your Calling podcast. I'm your host, Sherry Miter. I'm here to help you unleash your strengths and get clarity on your calling. I believe when you find your purpose in life, fulfillment, joy, and success will follow. If you're ready, pop in those earbuds, hit that follow button, and join me on this journey toward discovering your calling. So today, as I promised in the last episode, I'm going to share just a little bit of things I've learned in this process of writing my Discovering Your Calling book, but also some tidbits about what's inside the book and what's inside the Discovering Your Calling Academy. And, there are 8 phases that I take my students through and the reader through for the Discovering Your Calling Academy. And today, I'm just going to kind of pull out 4 little tidbits from 4 different phases, because they're ones that either were a big reminder as I listened to the replay of the different cohorts that I've done. I'm like, oh, that was really good. Or, wow, I forgot how impactful that was for the listener or for the students in that. Or there are pieces that I've been using in order to write this book and get it done, because there's similar, it's very similar. The process of writing the book is very similar to the whole process of discovering your calling and figure out what is that career that you were designed to do that will make you feel like you have a purpose and give you fulfillment. So anyway, let's break these down. And I apologize if this episode feels like a fire hose coming at you, because it feels like it's a lot of random things, but they kind of all tie together. So hopefully you'll see that. And one way that you might want to listen to this if it starts to feel like a lot is break down the 4 chunks. Listen to the first part, take a pause, think about it, answer the questions, and then come back to the podcast. Listen to the second part. So feel free to do that, whatever serves you best. Okay, let's jump into this. So the first phase is actually phase 2 that I wanted to talk about, and that's the visioneering phase. And I got the word visioneering from a book I read a while back from Andy Stanley. And in that phase, we really dig deep into what we want our life to look like. And, what's the vision you have for your life? And, what will your life look like when you have your ideal dream career that is energizing and you find success with ease? Like, what's that going to feel like? And we work on really designing the life you want first, and then figuring out what is your ideal career that's going to allow you to create that lifestyle you dream about, which is so contradictory to what society teaches us, right? Because in society, you have a career and then you're left to fill in, put your life around all the little pieces and chunks of time left after you do your career. And we want to flip that. And that's one of the things that, one of the most important phases that we go through in the Discovering Your Calling process. And I've also been doing that myself, because I needed to keep in mind, what will life look like when this book is done? And even what will life look like for each step along the way of finishing this book? What is it going to feel like when I finally have the rough draft finished? What is it going to feel like when I turn it all over to the self-publishing company to get it published? What is it going to feel like when I actually hold that book in my hand? And it's about really getting so emotionally attached to those feelings, to those thoughts, to the visions you have in your brain. And when we're doing the visioneering phase in the Discovering Your Calling Academy, and I share these questions in the book, is I take the students through, first of all, like, what is the problem you have right now that we're trying to move from? And think about questions like, and again, these are questions that you can, pause and repeat and write these down so you can take yourself through these questions. But it's things like, what bothers you the most about your current situation? And are you able to use your natural gifts and talents in your current career? So many people aren't. And then what is happening in your life because of this situation? Like, how does you not being happy in your career, how is it affecting your relationships, your physical health, your mental well-being, your soul? Like, how is it affecting everything in your life? Because you're caught in this place that you're not satisfied with your career or your life. And, I share in the book and with my students that I know sometimes when we go into these questions and really sit with them, it can be kind of depressing because it really brings to light, like, I really don't like this. And, I don't know about you, but sometimes I can feel like, ooh, that's just going to send me on the couch with a pint of ice cream and Netflix. But it's important to know, like, where we're at and then move into where we want to be. And that's the whole visioneering part. And that's where it gets exciting. And this is where you can, grab a pen and journal and really think about these next questions, which are going to be way more exciting as you search for your calling. And they're questions like, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you love to be doing? And what are you curious about and always wanted to try? Or what would you love to study or learn about? I mean, it could be jewelry making. It doesn't matter what it is. Just jot these things down. I love this one. If you could live and work anywhere, where would you live? Like, this is the time to really dream big when we get into this stage. And how many days and hours a week would you really prefer to work? Who says a career has to be 40 hours a week? Then what would you do with your free time if you could cut down the hours you worked? How would you fill that time up? And then the other question I'll share right here, there's more that we talk about, but the other one I wanted to share with you today was, do you dream about being an entrepreneur and running your own business? Is that something that's in your heart and soul and you think, ooh, that would be fun? Or do you prefer to work for someone else and be part of a team in that respect? Now, again, for myself, writing this book, I had to really spend time visualizing again, what will life look like, not just in that process, as I already shared, but when the book is actually finished. And what will life look like when hopefully doors will be opened when this book is out there in the world? I hope it opens up more speaking engagements, the opportunity to be invited to do retreats for women to figure out their calling, the impact it's going to make on others' lives. So that's just a little bit about the visioneering phase, and which is actually phase 2. Now I'm kind of doing this in a backward order because now I want to talk about phase 1. And phase 1 is starting with strengths. And honestly, phase 1 takes, like, when I'm teaching this live in a Discovering Your Calling Academy, it's actually 3 sessions that we do this phase 1 of the strengths. And even in the book, it took up several chapters because this is huge. CliftonStrengths and knowing and talking about your God-given talents is weaved throughout the course, throughout the book. It's not just a one-time, we talk about it here and never mention it again. It's like the vital part of this whole process. I call your strengths your compass rose. They're the thing that when people start getting lost or feeling frustrated or getting confused, it's like, go back to your strengths, go back to your strengths, like a broken record. Just read your report again, read your report again. There's so much wealth in that CliftonStrengths 34 report. But, and as I was reviewing the videos of, again, the live cohorts, that's kind of been my process for writing the book, is I was reminded how in one of the other phases where we talked about strengths-based goal setting, one of the most profound things the students got out of it was when I shared about dialing up and dialing down your talent themes. Because here's the thing, we talk about all the time how your talents and your strengths can help you succeed in life with more ease and with more energy and how they're there to support you. But your talent themes can also hinder your progress and they can get in the way and slow you down, sometimes even stop you. And that was like this light bulb moment when I shared that in this live cohort. So, of course, I wanted to make sure that was shared in the book, and I wanted to share that with you today. And what do I mean by that? So, an example I share inside the book is I have learner and activator in my top 10. And my learner theme is one that, helps me always want to be learning things. Like I love to consume books. I love to take courses. I love to watch videos on anything how to, whether it's wine tasting to cooking to, of course, anything about CliftonStrengths or being a better coach, mindset, all those things. Like I'm always consuming things. But I also know there comes a point when I need to stop learning and implement what I've learned. Because if I stay in learning mode too long, I start to feel overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, I heard this idea and that idea. And oh my gosh, should I follow this person or that person? And it can freeze me up and I do nothing. And if you're a high learner, you probably know exactly what I mean. And that's when I need to dial down my learner theme and stop learning and dial up my activator talent theme, which wants to get in go mode. So activator's all about like, let's just get to work. So that's an example of how we need to know when to dial up, when to dial down, when is a strength going to help us, and when is one going to get in the way. But here's the thing, like activator in that scenario can help me go, but activator too, I got to be careful with that because I've got to strategize before I go. So it's a dance really of knowing when to lean on a strength and when to like, oop, okay, that one's being overused or that's going to hinder me right now. So we spent a lot of time inside the Discovering Your Calling Academy really talking about all of those things. So the other phase I wanted to mention actually was the phase that we kind of talked about dialing up and dialing down. And that's phase 7. And that's when we set strengths-based goals. And we do a whole process on goal setting that looks totally different than anything you've ever done before. We don't do SMART goals in the Discovering Your Academy. We do hard goals. And that's based on a book from Mark Murphy. But then we bring it in and we make it strengths-based goals. And I take the reader through, if you're reading the book when it's done or in the academy, we start by looking with a wide lens and look 5 years out and then bring it down to 3 years and 1 year. What do you want your life to look like? So it ties into the visioneering phase that we went through, but then we bring it all the way down to the micro, what action step do you need to do today? So we start really wide and bring it down to what needs to happen today. What's that action step today that's going to lead you to where you want to be in, 3 months? Where do you want to be in 6 months? Where are you going to be in a year, 3 years, 5 years? So we start wide and go down very, very narrow. And when we get to that narrow part, it becomes essential that we figure out when are we going to do that action step. And I realized when I was, again, playing back the videos that a lot of the students get stuck in that because they're like, well, I'm already so busy. When am I ever even going to fit this single step in? And I talked some about this recently, about just sometimes it's just 15 minutes, but it's also inside the book in the program, we really talk about how you do have to prioritize. And there's going to be a time that you will have to make some decisions on what to prioritize, what needs to be let go of in order to make space to work towards this goal and this vision that you have for your life. And, I have a saying a quote that I've talked about several times is you can't have success without sacrifice, but you can have success without sacrificing those you love. And what do I mean by that? I mean that there's going to be things you're going to have to give up in order to make room and space to do the thing you want to do. Now, for me, honestly, things I had to give up in order to find time to write was procrastinating in the morning. I had to give up on creating other projects that I wanted to do for my business. I had to give up time going to the beach and the pool. And here's a huge one. I had to give up time scrolling social media. So nothing too earth shattering. I had to get disciplined on getting up in the morning and making sure I got to work earlier rather than spending 2 hours sitting and having my coffee. It's sometimes we just we know how to waste time really well. And I know some of you are super duper busy. You have small children, you have jobs that are demanding. But where can you just carve out 15 minutes for yourself to work towards something that's going to change your life and your family's life? And it might be, because we also talk about in another phase, priorities and not priorities, but non-essentials or non-negotiables. And maybe a non-negotiable you have is sitting down for dinner, every night is important to you. Keep that, but do you have to be the one that cleans up the dinner, the mess afterwards? Can somebody else do that so you can go work on your passion project? So what are the things that you can give up temporarily in order to start working towards the vision and dream you have for your life? And then plug it into your calendar. Put it down in the calendar, because we all know if it's not on the calendar, it's not happening. It's not real. All right. So the last phase I wanted to mention here today was the impact phase. And that's phase 6, where we talk about the impact you're going to have and why that is important. Why does that matter to you? And why does that matter to the world that you do this? And it's so important to know your deep down why, because when doubt and fear and you get tired and you feel overwhelmed and all those emotions creep in, it's your why that's going to keep you going. And inside the book, I teach what I call the peel back the onion. And it's really finding that deep down why. And you've probably heard me talk about it on the podcast, but it's getting down to that deep layer to the why that makes you cry. And it's asking yourself the question is, well, why does that even matter? And then you come up with that answer and you think about it. And then, well, why do you even want that in your life? Or why does that matter? Until you can really get down again to that deep, deep layer. And like I said, that makes you emotional. That makes you either cry or almost cry, because that's the real why. Otherwise, a lot of the time, the why we say to begin with, it's pretty superficial. It's not really the why that's going to keep you going when you are tired and you are sacrificing something. You need to know that heartfelt, deep why. And it's got to be very personal to you. And that's what's going to drive you to work towards this dream life. And, after we did this exercise in one of the Discovering Your Calling Academy cohorts, again, I just heard this on the video replay of it. One of the students said this, and I wanted to share this with you. And she said, "Thank you for helping me bring back up my why. I've had to step away for a minute because I got so overwhelmed with everything." She's a high learner too. "And I couldn't see what the purpose was anymore. I was going through the motions and pushing and pushing. I lost my why. I lost why I was doing what I've been doing. This exercise reminded me I'm going to be more motivated to go back and do what I need to do to accomplish my goals. I'm reminded to take the time to step back, reset my goals, and take needle-moving action instead of wasting time and energy." Wow, so powerful, right? And that's what, when you know your why and you're clear on that, it's going to help you know why you're doing this. Because you're going to have days like that. Like, why am I even doing this? It's so much easier just to stay stuck in this career. And for me, writing this book, I constantly have to remind myself of my why. And, one of my deeper whys is honestly just making my husband proud. He wants this book, I think, more than I do some days. So I need to finish this for him. And I keep that vision in my head of what is it going to feel like when he has this book and he's holding it in his hands. And I also know that this book can change lives. And it's a generational effect because I've seen it. What happens when somebody goes from being burnt out and depressed and a little hateful because they don't enjoy their job anymore, to having a purpose, to being more fulfilled, being happier in their career, having more energy to give to the ones they really love, and just being more joyful. It has a ripple effect to how it affects our communities and our world. And that's my bigger driving why. One of them, I should say. I also know that there's going to be more people that will read this book that I'm writing than I'll ever be able to reach in a coaching program. So those are some of the whys that keep me going. So what's that deep, deep why you have? Again, keep asking yourself, why does that matter? And why does that matter? About 7 layers deep. because that's the why that'll make you cry. Okay, my friends. So again, I know that just sharing these 4 phases and these 4 tidbits kind of random might have felt, again, like that fire hose coming at you. So break it down, listen to each part separately. But I urge you to ask yourself the questions that I posed today. Think about them. What is your deep why? What are your strengths? Have you done the CliftonStrengths thing yet? If not, reach out to me. Or just go to Gallup and take the assessment. You don't have to go through me. Visioneering, what do you want your life to look like 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 6 months from now? What's the wide lens? What's your goals? What's the action step you can take tomorrow to start working towards that dream life? And if this episode has left you a little more curious about the Discovering Your Calling Academy and or the book, please make sure you tune in every Tuesday to a new episode, because I'm working on a very cool project behind the scenes that's going to enable you to hear a lot more about the 8 phases of the Discovering Your Calling Academy right here on the podcast. And I promise I'll just cover 1 phase at a time, so it won't be so confusing. But first, I have to use my focus theme so I can finish the rough draft and the editing to get that part done. That is my priority right now. But next week, I will be back with another juicy episode for you. And I think I'm going to be sharing an episode on, is it worth the risk? So is it worth the risk to switch careers? Is it worth the risk to start a new business? So, because I've had some people say risk is something that keeps them stuck. But anyway, and if you enjoyed today's episode, I would love to hear, which of the topics would you like me to go a little bit more into? Which topics left you having more questions? And or if there's a topic you would love for me to cover on this, send me a text. There's actually a direct link now in the show notes where you can send me a direct message or a direct text message. Super cool. So anyway, thanks for tuning in to the Discovering Your Calling podcast, and I will catch you next week on Tuesday.
Thank you for spending this time with me. My hope is something you heard today inspires you to take action toward discovering your calling. I just have 2 favors to ask of you before you go. 1, if you found value and enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you might hear your review read on a future episode. And 2, can you share this episode with 3 friends who will also enjoy it as much as you did? By doing these things, you will help us grow the podcast to make a bigger impact on the world. And until next week, remember, you've been created to live a life of fulfillment, freedom, purpose, success, and joy.